Yes, I will be.
I didn't bring these to throw at you guys.
I'll make
Are they
a motion
boiled?
to,
No.
I'll make a motion to reconvene open session, disclose that no votes were taken in executive session, and to seal the minutes of closed executive session.
Second. All in favor? Roll the clerk, please.
Councilor Greathouse?
Aye.
Councilor Steer?
Aye.
Councilor Burlingame?
Aye.
Councilor Arnold?
Aye.
Councilor Wood?
Aye. All right, just a quick minute.
Yeah, I got it all ready on my laptop. So you'll just.
Two. You could take me out.
Me out to the ball game.
Well, it's not very dark. Because I have the budget on that I can put on the screen. Yeah.
All right, welcome everybody for the public hearing. Proposed budget for fiscal year 24-25, discussion and interaction. Review the proposed budget as needed, public discussion. Public hearing was advertised in the Valley Breeze Observer on 3/28/2024 and 4/11/2024. I declare the public hearing open. So the hearing is to review the discussed budget. First, we'll have a review of the budget under item 1. Questions can be asked, and under item 2, council can discuss the budget and or proposed changes under 3. So review of proposed budget. Our finance director will present the highlights of the budget for the town and local schools. Jane?
Mike Robinson, the budget chair, is prepared to do that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Come on up, Mike.
All right.
Who volunteered for this? I'd like to welcome all my fellow taxpayers, and I want to, I have to be careful if I talk in my regular voice, it gets too loud. But at any rate, I guess I want to open this by stating that we did manage to get the budget done, and it was really a Herculean effort, and every taxpayer in this town owes a debt of gratitude to both Jane and Beth, who worked very, very hard to get this, and without them, none of this really would have been possible. And I also want to thank all my fellow members of the budget board for their efforts in sweating the details of this. The budget, as you know, you can look at and see, is far too much to go into line by line. But I guess to start off, I should tell you that I play poker on Saturday nights. And the first rule of poker is don't bet money that you can't afford to lose. How well I know. And the second rule of poker is you've got to play the cards that are in your hand, not the ones that you would like. And on that measure, that's kind of like what we're going to have to do with this particular budget. The budget is both good news and unfortunately very bad news. To set the stage for the good news, you kind of have to look at what the town is under. And we basically have to get an idea of what the inflation rate has been over the last 4 years. And if you go to the website Coin News, that's the one I used. If you go to other websites, you might see minor differences, but this is what it is. Between 2010 and 2020, the inflation rate was 0.5 to 2.5% per year. In 2020, the inflation rate was 1.4. Remember those ARPA funds that we spent? Well, ARPA funds were released in 2021. The inflation rate jumped to 7%, according to Coin News. If you look at other websites, you'll see it running as high as 13. It depends upon what you're going to count in your inflation rate. In 2022, it was 6.5. Now, inflation is a really, really bad thing because there's no point in putting $100 in the bank if 2 years from now it's only going to buy $80 worth of materials. And when you live in a capitalist society, that's really bad. So the only way they can start trying to tame inflation is they've got to jack up interest rates. So interest rates that were at a very reasonable 3, maybe 4% 4 years ago are now running between 6 and 10. And this makes the cost of borrowing money. So when they did that, you could look at it. In 2021, the inflation rate was 7%. 2022, it was 6.5. 2023, it was 3.5. So they managed to bring down the rate of inflation. That doesn't mean that they did anything to change the increase in prices that you had to deal with in 2021 and 2022. 2024, it looks like it's going to probably be running at least 3.8%, but some of the figures I see put it as high as 6. So, as I mentioned, the inflation rate, you raise interest rates, the cost to borrow money increase. That's kind of setting the good news, and let me clarify that my comments tonight are really addressing the municipal budget. It's not addressing the school. That's really another whole bang. The budget board and the town council is prohibited by town charter from getting into the line items of the school. So let me say that, basically, if you look over the last 4 years with an inflation rate that averaged about 4.5%, we managed to put together a municipal budget of $9,559,784. And that was an increase of $364,000, or an increase of 3.5%, 3.85%. 3.85% is less than 4.5%. So that's the good news. We basically had to bring it down to 3.8% because of one of the parameters that we're forced to work under. By state law, the property tax portion of a municipal bill cannot increase by more than 4%. And prior to March 13th, when we came in, Jane read us the Riot Act, that our budget was about $200,000 over that. So we had to address it at that particular meeting. And we managed to do it. We got it down to, like I said, 3.84. But here's the problem, which brings us to the very bad news. The good news is a lie. It's not 3.84%. 3.84% is less than 4.5. That's not a political opinion. That is arithmetic. But at any rate, to make ourselves in compliance with state law, we made some changes. So going through the minutes of the 313 budget, we were asked by legal services that we should put aside $50,000 for an anticipated lawsuit that may or may not occur. So we took that out because you can't put money in that you obviously don't have. But if that lawsuit materializes, we will have to pay the $50,000. It won't come out of property taxes. It'll come out of the town budget. We also decreased the tax assessor's office. We had allocated $25,000 each year because I think it's every 5 years? Is it every 5 years, Jane, or every 3 years? Every 3 years, we have to do a property revaluation. So we had set aside $25,000 to amortize that, so that 3 years from now, we don't hit you with a $75,000 increase out of the tax assessors. We removed that as well. We took out tree removal. We took out about $10,000 from $30,000 to $20,000. We took snow removal and removed that from $75,000 to $83,000. Let's face it, the last couple of winters have been pretty mild. And, but on the other hand, if we get hit with 5 snowstorms in December of 2024, are the towns going to get plowed? Yup. Are they going to get sanded? Yup. Is the town going to pay for it? Yup. Where is the money going to come from? It doesn't come out of your tax dollar, it comes out of the town's general fund. We decreased the gasoline to the police by $10,000 from $90,000 to $80,000. With the price of gas on the uptick again, if we go over budget on that, are the police officers' cars going to stop? No. Where is the money going to come from? The general fund. So at any rate, there was that, and there was other. We We basically brought it down to $200,000, which brought us under the state cap. But unfortunately, it's on paper. It has no bearing with what will actually happen in terms of the town. And it's kind of a scary process because the town budget, or the town general fund, used to be at a very healthy 17% of your average, of your annual operating budget. But over the last 3 years, that's declined to 14%. And according to town charter, it can't drop below 12%. So we're looking at basically two conflicting parameters that are about to collide in the town charter. The second thing that I wanted to talk about with more very bad news, if you go to page 35 of 35 of the budget, these were the capital expenditures that were requested by the town budget. Now, the other parameter that we have to deal with according to the town charter is that capital expenditures are capped at 2%. Well, 2% of our operating budget came out to about $664,000, somewhere in that neighborhood. In any event, just the roads, not vehicles, not changing houses, not doing maintenance on the buildings, just the roads needed over $1 million worth of, needed over $1 million. But we went to Gary, who graciously pointed us in the direction as to, well, what are the three things that, that we can do that are going to cause the least amount of pain. And we did. We got it down. We didn't get it down to 664,000, but we did get it down to about 700, a little more than 700,000. But if you go according to the town charter, that made it we're 100,000 over. But if you take a look at what actually needs to be done, we're $1.4 billion undercapitalized. So, I don't mean to throw cold water. I want to emphasize 3 times. Nothing that I'm telling you now should be indicative of you going and voting down the budget. The budget needs to be passed. And the budget needs to be passed as soon as possible in order to keep the town running. My point here is that the parameters that we're working on, that worked fine when you had an inflation rate between 0 and 2%, are economic suicide if you keep trying to follow them blindly. And that's my main point. So I would again like to thank Jane and Beth, and I'd like to thank everyone who took the time to come here today to listen to it. But I wish I had better news for you, but it's the best I can do, I guess, under the circumstances.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you and the entire budget board for all the time, blood, sweat, and tears you guys put into this. Lots of Mondays and Wednesdays nights here under this roof, and
Keeps you honest.
yeah, sure does. But thank you for your time to the whole team. Sincerely, thank you guys.
Go at this point, public discussion, anybody that wants to get up and speak or ask questions, just come up to the podium, state your name for the record.
Kevin O'Connor's, 59 Tucker Street. So just a couple of questions from what you had said. So on page 1 of the budget, you had stated the increase of being 4-point-something%, I believe. But the line item under municipal expenses, if I'm reading it correctly, 665,169, which is So the increase in expenses is actually 8%, is that correct? I can see that there's a revenue number, but I'm just talking about increased expenses. So the net number I see is coming in,
Which, on
Page-
page one,
page one.
you're dealing with the municipal budget,
Yep.
okay? We're looking at a.
Subtotal municipal expenses. 665, is that correct?
9,559,784 with an
So,
increase.
so I'm looking at the delta. The final proposed for '24, less the '23 budget.
I think that takes into account changes in revenue.
Nope, I'm saying before the revenue, 665, and what I printed out shows an 8% increase year over year. This is the one that was online, that I printed out last week. So I'm just clarifying, so it's if it's an 8% increase, the expenses increase by 8%. I'll make correct, tell me.
If you
I
look
can
at,
show it.
I'm going under subtotal municipal
You look at this
expenses,
line,
9,559,784.
Okay, this is an updated one, that looks wrong.
Well, all we have is 321, which one does he have? Dated 321.
That's what was online.
That's
that's
what,
the online one. They told me, I asked at the beginning, you said it was the same one that was online.
I was making an assumption.
That's what I have, 321.
321 is the one you have?
Dated 321. It'd be at the bottom left-hand corner.
By,
Yeah, it shows it right there.
It's the date, right there. What's that,
sorry, yeah, I got an older one.
Okay.
Okay. So what's the delta on just the expense line?
Municipal expenses, 364036.
All right, so yeah, that one. So anyway, the other question I had was I spoke with Jessica last week, had a nice conversation with her regarding the valuation assessment of FM Global. It sounds like some work was done in 2023 and completed now, and sounds like the approximate valuation, she said there was still some work to be done on it, but the approximate valuation was 184 million. Sound right?
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, ballpark. That's
Um,
ballpark.
So is the commercial rate going to be around 17? I thought I saw a number like that, 17 per thousand.
Yeah.
It's not set yet,
Not
okay.
set.
Oh, good.
All right.
The rate,
That's proposed.
That's okay. So at that proposal, that comes in at about 3,143,000. So my question was, when you compare that to what FM Global paid last year, what's the delta in that number? Because I think it comes out now from a separate line item because of the way they used to pay taxes, say back in 2020, 2021, where it was a line item, so you could see what FM Global paid.
Yeah, so that's
That's when it was,
correct,
$3 million or
exactly, so
whatever.
that is in the number of amount to be raised, by
Yeah,
taxes.
which is
It's not- it's
which is
not-
unfortunate, because now the taxpayers can't see. It'd be nice if that was set, because it's such a big
I think
number.
they paid about 1.7 last year.
Once the rate is set, what's that?
It will show in the tax roll.
Yeah,
What they
Yeah,
actually
I
paid.
should
that's
go
a
to
matter
that-
of,
to that detail.
that's a matter, once the
if-
rate is set, that is,
So if the 1.7 is near correct,
I think that's close to what they paid last year, yeah.
so that's pretty big delta, and I commend the work that was done. What was proposed shows that my tax rate's gonna go up as well, though. And I'll be honest, I was kinda hoping that certainly with what you guys, it's a significant increase in revenue.
that should not be the case.
It should not go up, it should,
That, I don't wanna guess,
So
but that
I'm comparing the 3.143, and I know that's not set, but even if it's lower,
no, and I don't want, so their revenue, you can't just take one rate. because
No,
it's,
some of
okay.
some of it's property, some of it's.
Correct, it's tangible
and
property,
just-
all that
just
stuff,
going
so we
through that.
can't just like
And
do
the commercial-
one math equation.
Yep.
But the way you read that, assuming a significant increase based on their.
The assessment went up dramatically. She gave me the
Yeah,
history
so
of the assessment.
so assuming that big jump in assessed value and therefore, you should not be assuming a big increase on your residential rate at all.
I'm just, again, in the bargain buyer, a couple of weeks ago, there was, I believe, a very, very summarized budget of what was being proposed.
I think you'll like this year's tax bill better than you liked last year's.
I don't know, and the
Right.
budget comes
So
out,
what-
unfortunately, the budget comes out before the tax bill.
Yeah, and the budget will be.
You have to create, the budget has to be set before we can
Right.
set the taxes, but
Yep.
but you can assume if there's a large increase in that one commercial taxpayer, and we're still stuck at a 4% total increase, so we can't increase the budget by more than, then the residential contribution is gonna be less.
And that's what
Okay,
I'm,
and
that's what I'm hoping, but I
I'm not
don't
gonna
know
suppose on a
that.
rate, because I know that's what they did, was it last year, or the year before, they're saying, oh, this is gonna be this.
We don't wanna
We're not
guess
gonna-
until
We're not gonna make any
everything's
guesses, but
Right.
So I guess when that information's available, would that be made to the public somehow, and where will that be done?
Yeah,
Absolutely.
absolutely. May 6th is the final vote on, what.
Budget to
uh,
propose.
on the proposed budget, and then that rate would be known, Jane, at that point? Or-
We would have an estimate until she locks the roll, it won't be definite, but we will have this, very close estimate after you decide how the budget's gonna be. Then she will have her figures and we should have an estimate.
Again, I'm not.
And that estimated, that rate will be out there prior
To the
to the vote, yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
Yes.
Right.
Another, ad will have to go in the paper for a state law.
Yep.
We have to send it back into the state, get their approval before we advertise for the referendum.
So at May 6th, if I wanted to, I could give Jessica a call at that point, and she would know the exact numbers for FM Global at that point, I assume. If
I
you-
don't
if you're gonna,
think we
if you're gonna get to
really-
that point, then,
I don't think the exact number will be,
or close, I guess a close
well,
number.
close, an estimate,
Yeah.
yeah.
You know, she had told me that the 184 was an estimate, that wasn't the exact final number, but was in the ballpark. So, again, I'm very happy that it went up by the amount that it did, and I'm expecting the same type of thing. So I hope I'm pleasantly surprised, because to be honest with you, with how much it's changed over the last couple of years and the increases that the residential taxpayers have taken on, yeah, I was actually hoping for a decrease to come when this was finally done. So you're saying that's possible?
That's possible and probable.
Okay.
If the proposed budget, if it stayed where it was, that's probable, yeah.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, sir.
Who's next? Come on up, Dave.
Dave Steer, and I'd like to start with the school budget. And I just want one comment before I start. I know Mike said that the budget board and the council can't really look at the operating expenses for the school. Well, you can. You can look at them, you can see if they're reasonable, not reasonable, make your determination. And then, if you think they're not reasonable, how you adjust those is by the maintenance of effort. You don't give them what they want, or you give them more than they want, or whatever you decide once you look at them. But you can look at them. And I believe what the charter says is that once you give them the money, you can't tell them how to spend it. They can spend it. But you have every right to tell them how much they can get up to that maintenance of effort. You gotta give them the maintenance of effort. I just wanted to clarify that, if I'm right. On the school budget, for those who are kind of following along, what I'd like to do before I get to the 25 budget is just to kind of go through the 23, because it has effect all the way through, not only 23, but 24, and it'll affect 25. So I just want to quickly go through that. with some comments. And what I'm gonna be looking at is, if you take a look at the school budget, that's not up there, the second column of numbers, where it says approved budget 22-23, that's the column I'm gonna work with. Typically, these budgets would have a third column right behind that, which would give you the actual figures. For whatever reason, I guess the school committee decided not to have the budget presented that way. So a lot of the numbers I'm gonna talk about, if anybody's got their audit, and I see a few of them there, a lot of those numbers actually come from the audit, because there's nothing here to compare the approved budget to the actuals. The first number I like to look at is, if you go down, you see total operating expenses, 10,535,518. That's what was proposed. Okay? If you take a look at the audit,
Dave, where are you again on
I'm
that?
on the second column of numbers,
Yeah,
okay? Where it says approved budget 22-23.
yeah, I'm with you there.
And if you go down 4 line items, it says
10,
total operating
10, 8,
expenses,
gotcha.
okay? And it's 10,532,518.
Yeah,
Okay? And if I go too fast, just tell me to slow down, because sometimes I'll do that. The actual number for operating expenses was 11,186,589. So they missed the mark by 550,000 and change.
What was that number, Dave?
It's on page
11
87.
million.
It's on the audit.
On the
Yeah,
order, page
turn to page
87.
137 or 87.
87.
They're both there.
Okay.
But it's a significant overrun. I don't know how that happened, but it's a significant overrun. The next number I want to take a look at is, if you go about halfway down, it says transfer from fund balance for operations. And they budgeted 390,000. The actual number that they took from the fund balance was 981,476. And once again, that's not my number, that's the auditor's number. That's what's in the audit. Now the next is going to be in the audit. Unfortunately, not everybody's going to be able to see it. But the deficit reported was 239,367. That wasn't the deficit. The deficit was $984,393.
984,393.
984,393. Page 137 of the audit. There's a couple of key pages in that audit. That's one of them. Okay, so how did the school go from a deficit of 984,393 down to the reported 239,367? Well, if you take a look at the audit, what they did was they took an additional $566,958 from their fund balance. I'm not sure how that was authorized. Certainly wasn't in the budget. That still wouldn't get them down to 239,000 and change. There was a transfer by the town of $178,068 to the schools. I'm not sure where that came from. I'm not sure how that got approved, but that got them down to the deficit that they reported of 239. So they were in a lot worse financial condition than what I think was reported. It took a lot of extra cash from two places to get them to a deficit of only 239,000. And the chart is pretty clear on what you cannot do. You cannot pay your deficit with fund balance. Obviously, they did. And also, I believe that the charter says any use of the fund balance to pay deficit has to be voted at a town financial meeting, which obviously didn't happen. And the other question was, you know, they ended fiscal year 22 with a fund balance of $31,000. They ended fiscal year 23 with $525,844. And they had that $984,000 deficit. That's pretty good math. That brings us to the 24 budget, and that's basically the fourth column.
Just 1 second, before Mr. Steer goes any further, can we make a response? Or can we just make a statement?
Yeah, come on up, you can make a statement. Just 1 second, Dave.
Pat Henry, I'm a member of both school department, school committees. So Dave, with all due respect, and you keep referring to the schools and the school, you haven't said committee, but the schools. These things that were done, this was all finance department and finance director work. This was not done by the superintendent or the school committee. And we've been scratching our heads too as to exactly what the last two finance directors possibly have done. And that's all I'm gonna say. Thank you.
Thank you.
I don't want to get in an argument, but the superintendent and the school committee are the finals. I don't care who put the budget together. Somebody voted on that budget. Somebody needed to look at that budget. And if it wasn't right, they should have brought it back to whoever to make it right. So
Dave,
I don't agree with that
comment.
argument.
We're not accountants and we're not finance directors.
And neither am I. You can look at it and know whether it's right or wrong. The approved 24 budget. And that's 5 columns in, 4 columns in. Total operating expenses, $10,866,069. It would appear to me, based on the 23 actuals, that's going to be very, very low, and I can't believe it's going to be an adequate number. I don't know that. It's just if you're that far over on 10,000,005, chances are you're going to be over on 10,000,008. So my question is, where are you now through 3/4 of the year? Are expenses exceeding revenues, or are revenues still exceeding expenses? Because I can see a big deficit coming up again, and you may or may not have fund balance to take care of it. Does anybody know that? I know what the charter says. When you know there's a deficit, the school committee and the superintendent should be notifying finance office and the town council. So, once again, somebody ought to be looking at that so you don't get another surprise at the end of this fiscal year. The 25 operating budget, and that's the 6th column. Somebody's done some work. Now the total operating expenses are $11,488 and change, which is a good increase over the 24 budget, and is more in line with what the actual 23 numbers were. So that's a positive, I guess. State aid, that's another positive. That's increasing by 5.25%. Another problem, you're budgeting town reserve for loss of aid operation expenses of $335,000. I don't think you've got $335,000 to put in there in that account. And doing the math, you're either going to have, if you go by what the voters approved in the budgets and in referendums, you'll have $153,892 in that account for use into next year's school budget. If you go by what's in the audit, and I'm not saying I agree with every number in the audit, I'm not saying the numbers are wrong, I just don't think they came from the right places. You could have as much as $235,000 in that account. So the council needs to decide, did the voters, what they say should have been done, is that the correct way to go? To me, that's the correct way to go. Because the voters actually voted on those numbers. You can justify those numbers. Can you justify the school numbers? Well, if you take a look and see where some of that money didn't come from, or did come from, and I'm going to touch on that a little bit when we get to the town budget. But I don't think you got $335,000. Somebody needs to make that decision. I'm kind of throwing it out there for you guys to wrestle with, I guess. The 25 budget doesn't indicate any fund balance being used by the schools. Tuitions, you're budgeting that at $20,000. Problem I have with that is, and maybe there's a very good reason for the $20,000, for the 2 previous years, you budgeted $10,000, and there was no revenue from tuitions. So maybe that's changed in the upcoming year, I don't know, but it hasn't been a revenue maker for them at all. And I think that's all I got on the school budget. The town budget. I'm going to do basically the same thing. I'm just kind of going to go through what happened in 23 to the town, because it does affect what's going to happen in your budgets in the future. As of 6/30/23, the town had an unassigned fund balance, or you call it surplus, of $5,419,059. And once again, I apologize to the audience, you don't have this information. If you got an audit, you have this information. It's on page 18, I believe. This is a decrease of $982,000 in your fund balance, your surplus. However, if you take a look at your approved 23 budget, you authorized $807,276 to come out of your fund balance. So an additional $174,805 came out of your fund balance. Also in the audit, the town had a positive cash flow, $6,303. That's it. That's all. You were that far away from having a negative budget. And that's based on a $20 million budget. That's backing out the schools. Just to give you an idea, fiscal year 22, the fund balance increased by $274,000. We did a lot of spending in 23. One of the reasons, if you take a look at your audit, 11 departments overspent their budget in 23. Let me just give you some examples. Treasurer's office, overspent by $76,000. Public Works, Buildings and Grounds, overspent by $37,433. Public Works Vehicle and Equipment, overspent by $36,175. But the winner was the police department. They overspent by $77,333. Okay, that's just some examples, like I say, there was 11 in there. To me, I don't know how you overspend on your budget. I know there's circumstances that maybe you have to, but I would imagine that the finance office sends out or gives out to not only the school department, but also to department heads where they are on their budget to actuals, to see where you are. So to be overspending by that kind of money, I don't know how you do it. Either you don't pay attention to the information you get, or I don't know. But that's something I think somebody needs to get a better handle on, more control over, so it doesn't happen in the future. And there's also some things in the budget that 23 budget that weren't budgeted. And I just want to give you a couple examples on that. If you take a look at page 7, and everybody will have page 7. Under the Board of Canvassers, about halfway down, you see an expense called district realignment. There's no budget for it, but we spent $14,159. And on page 18, Chief, I'm not picking on you, but this is the police budget.
Bring it on, thank you.
Under service contracts, we budgeted $12,280. Actual figure was $47,191. Overspent by $35,000. And the very bottom there, it says police equipment replacement set aside, and I don't understand this one. There's no budget, but we spent $18,700. And I know where the $18,700 went. I just don't think it should be shown here as an expense, which affects your bottom line, which is one of the reasons why you only had a positive $6,300. So all of these things affect your bottom line, and they're all in the audit. The unassigned fund balance, as of 6/30/23, I said was $5,419,059. If you take out the expenses that were going to be paid by the fund balance in fiscal 24's budget, it's going to leave you a fund balance of $4,938,533, or 14.4% of your proposed 25. So that number is going to change a little bit depending on what you do with the budget. You're required to have 12%. So you're basically $825,000 over your 12%. And every 1% is $342,700. So you can see what you got to spend. It's not a lot for a town this size. The 25 budget just has some general comments. It looks like raises for non-union personnel in the town hall appears to be 4%, except for a few, okay? And I just want to, the planner, I think the budget has 6%, which is about $1,700 over the 4%. Financial analysts, 12.8% increase in salary, which is $5,500 over the 4%. Police chief, 8%, basically $4,600 over the 4%. And animal control, 7%, $1,550 over the 4%. Now, I don't know who decided who would get extra raises and who decided how much those extra raises would be. I guess that's a form of question.
So So the budget board received all the requests from all the, you know how it works, Dave, you were on there, so they've received all the requests, and they've forwarded their thoughts to this point, as Mr. Robinson mentioned before. They went through a lot of work to get to this point, so as far as the methodology to get those numbers, I don't know what that is.
So you're saying that somebody advocated for these people to get raises?
Some did, I don't know about some of them.
Some of them are department heads, so I'm not
Right.
sure who advocated for them to get.
Well, I'm not sure either. I know in some cases that they were advocated for, but sometimes it was the budget board came up with the.
I'm not saying they don't deserve it, I'm just saying,
I'm trying
the
to
fairness,
explain.
the fairness of the whole thing just doesn't seem fair that some would be singled out to get additional raises, where the rest, who are just as hardworking as the ones that are getting more, get stuck with the, I won't say get stuck, they get the 4%, which I think is a good raise.
And I think at least in one of those situations, it was due to, if you look at pay over the region, that pay grade was low, and they wanted to bring it up, not to the highest, but an area where it would be competitive in competing towns.
Keeping employees.
I know, I've used that system when I was on the budget board, and I was told it wasn't a good system. So, all of a sudden, maybe it is, but that's a hard system to use because it's never apples to apples. Somebody's got other duties in another town that maybe your employee doesn't have those duties, et cetera. Maybe the town's much larger. There's a lot of things that would go into it. If you're gonna use that system, you have to do a lot of work in order to come up with those numbers.
Chair, I'm gonna put you on hold for 1 second.
I just want to say that these were
Hold on.
a lot.
Hold on 1 second. Hold on 1 second. Go
I
ahead.
just want to say, these were requests put in by departments, the budget board put them into the budget, and I gave the council a memo letting them know what was put in.
Yep.
Some of them, they didn't put in what was quite what was asked for, but that's how they got in there. And then they left it up to the council to decide how it should be,
Thank you.
basically.
Did you wanna add
Well,
to that?
not yet, I mean, that's
We haven't decided
tonight.
yet.
No,
Okay.
that's what I'm saying.
Thank you.
Right.
Okay, good. Good.
Set?
Yes.
Okay, now to some of the expenses in the budget. And I'm gonna give you a page number, page 11.
Yeah, I saw it.
Under land trust. And this is just a comment. I know you're budgeting 80,000, but all you basically have done the last 3 years, when you budgeted 74,250, was building a deficit. Because your expenses for the land trust in fiscal year 21 was 96,000 and change, 22 was 129,000, 23 was 129,000. So you can, I know why you're budgeting, when you're looking for money, you budget that way. But all you're doing is putting a deficit in your budget. If you come out with 120,000 this year, you got a $40,000 deficit right off the bat. You know, budget, you're supposed to put in, I guess, reasonable numbers. And once again, I know why those numbers were put in there. When you're looking for money to make savings, the last couple of years been tough. I get that, but it's not a good way to budget. Page 19. Emergency Management Agency. And I don't have a problem with any of the expenses. I just want to give a little history, I guess. You've got an expense, next to last one, radio equipment and maintenance. We always budget 5,000, and that's fine. But the money that you don't spend in that line item is supposed to be assigned to the radio equipment fund. Hasn't done that since probably Diane was here, because I think knowledge is lost. Nothing passes on. It's just that in the last 2 years, that fund's lost a little over $5,400 by not assigning it. So that's just a comment on one of the items that should be assigned, and there's several more within the budget that never get assigned to where they're supposed to be assigned. Page 26. The very last expense on that page, soil testing. We didn't budget anything in '23, we didn't use anything in '23. This fiscal year, we're budgeting $6,000. And actually, we haven't used any money. I went back to '22, we didn't use any money in '22 either. I'm just curious, is this a every 3-year expense? Because we haven't used anything to date.
I'd have to ask the DPW director, that's not something we deal with. So, yeah, it's part of the budget, but.
Is it needed? My question is, it
You're
needed?
right, we can ask that.
Page 29. Senior Center. Second expense, RISE contract. We budget every year for the last 3 years, $2,000. We haven't used a penny of it for 2 years. We haven't used anything to date. That might be another question. Page 31. We've got 2 expenses. Accrued compensated absences and transfer of the healthcare reserve. And actually the healthcare, we haven't been budgeting anything, so we're good with that one. But that's another one of those accounts where if you don't use the money, the 5,000, those funds should be assigned to that account and not just drop to your bottom line. If you back up a little bit under salaries, negotiation salaries, and if you go over the request for 25, $72,851. Within that number is a new foreman at $11,000. The question is, do we need 2 foremans? Do we need to add $11,000 to the budget for a second foreman? Page 4. Promise, I'm almost done. Under your adjustments, once again, you'll see the $335,000 that's going to the schools. Okay, so whether you've got that amount or not, there needs to be an adjustment there. Your levy, you plan on increasing your levy by $937,393, the amount to be raised by taxes. The maximum you can raise that 4%, or $1,003,462. So if the budget stays just like it is, no adjustments, or if you want to add anything without subtracting anything, the most money you've got is $66,000. That's all you got. That'll get you to 4%. That's all I got. Thanks for letting me speak.
Thank you, Dave.
Thank you, David.
Pat?
Well,
I think the first thing I want to say is this is a town that has never gone through what it's currently going through, and that is you have been without a finance director now for the better part of 2 years. You had one, left, had one, left, and I think everybody is probably doing their damnedest to try. I know from a school standpoint, and I want to reiterate that. And I was on budget board with Dave, and I know he didn't mean anything by it, but we're not finance directors, we're not accountants, we're not financial people. We're there as school committee people to make sure that curriculum is and kids are being served. We're not there to build a budget from the ground up. We're paid a nominal stipend of, I think, about $1,000 for the work that we all do. And we all sit on a lot of subcommittees. The superintendent isn't a finance person. Everybody's been trying to build this budget without knowing who to go to and where to get the numbers from. And we don't look at audits because we're not finance people to do that. We try to build a budget with the number that's given. And I think that's really important to recognize this year, because this has been a very difficult year for the schools. The region, we just lost a finance manager at the region again. Here we are, we don't have a finance person again. We don't have one here, we don't have one there. And this is pretty serious stuff. When I was on budget board, yeah, we used to sit here with almost 18% in fund balance. Now we're, barely meeting the minimum. Gloucester was always really well run. But the bottom line sits with the town council. And you guys know that, and I know it because I sat there for 4 years. So when questions come up like who decides that somebody gets a raise, a higher raise than somebody else, that ultimately, it all comes to you all to start looking at. So the answer really is, you guys could have changed that before you put this budget together, right, the salary numbers.
Council hasn't made any changes.
So you still have time to do that now, right? Yeah, okay.
Absolutely.
That's what we're doing tonight,
This
we're
is
looking
what
at
we
tonight.
got.
We haven't
Right.
made any changes.
Right. So ultimately, I think that's important for the town to know that you now have that opportunity to make those kinds of adjustments.
Council hasn't made any changes to this.
Dave, I wish you'd sit on budget board again. Because your knowledge is invaluable. But with all due respect, and you know how much I appreciate and respect you, this Monday morning quarterback thing doesn't work for anybody. You should be on budget board.
I've said it in the past, it takes a village to come together and run a town. And on Pat's comment, a lot of us are volunteers without, finance backgrounds. And I think we are making steps as a town to move it. We've had to go through some serious times over the last 3 years, things that are not planned. We can only do what we can do with the information that we're given. So, yes.
Mike Robinson, 103 Pine Ridge Road. Dude, that was awesome! That was awesome! You know what'll be even more awesome? January 1st, we start our meetings. Love to have you, open to the public. That's the point, that it will actually make a difference in what's going to be happening here at the budget board. That's all I got to say. Sincerely, man, if I had a hat, I'd be taking it off to you.
Thank you. Bob?
How's everyone doing tonight?
Fantastic.
Oh, Well, how do you follow Dave's Act? Well, you do it by asking for money as opposed to telling you how you're gonna save money. So this year, similar to last year, my recreational materials and equipment line item was cut, or was suggested to be cut. Last year it was a $5,000 number, and if you're looking for my budget, it's on page 28 of 35. Last year it was $5,000 that they had suggested to cut from that line item, and this year it's $7,000. Another item that was also cut was the proposed amount for the Glocester Recreation Commission ski trip, which was in $2,000. I completely understood coming into this year that it was going to be a very difficult budget cycle. I knew that things had to really just fit in perfectly, so I tried providing a budget that, you know, fit those needs. I had a dollar raise that I had to provide to all of my employees that I tried to go ahead and handle. I also had to go ahead and keep up with the Joneses when it came to the lifeguards and increase their wages as well. But if you look at, and I'll flip you back to page 27, you'll notice that last year I asked for $60,942, and this year, through some sleight of hand, I guess, I'm only asking for $61,560. So I tried going ahead and making some adjustments there. Additionally, last year we added on an extra assistant director. It's not really an assistant director, we call them program supervisors, to increase that line item to $1,500. And also you'll see I received that 4% increase. What I'm just asking for at this point is not necessarily to get back that full $7,000. I'd love to go ahead and sacrifice the 4% that I'm receiving because it's a nominal amount. It's something that's not going to break my pocket. But what really is going to hurt is not necessarily having those funds in my recreational material and equipment. Additionally, I can go ahead and go without those program supervisors. While they were definitely helpful and they helped with a little bit of alleviating the burden that I had during our big 6-week push, that's something else that I can go ahead and resume and take on again myself. But what I can't do is I can't continue to run the programs that we've been adding to the recreation department over the past 7 years with a line item that's decreased to that particular point where it's only $3,000. If we're gonna do something like that, unfortunately, we're gonna have to go back to the programming that we saw probably when Dave Chase was still in charge of recreation, which consisted of swim and tennis and the road race. All the other stuff that we've added, especially the events throughout the school year, unfortunately would have to be cut because, as you all know, things have become that much more expensive over the course of this year. Inflation is obviously real. And I tried my absolute best to provide a budget that reflected that and understood the needs of the town. So I think simply put, if there's some way that I can go ahead and receive minus the $2,600 that I had suggested taking out of my budget between my raise and the program directors, if we could have, it's I guess a little bit under $5,000 placed back into that recreation and materials and equipment line item, I'd really appreciate that. It'll allow me to continue to run those programs that we've all kind of become accustomed to over the past few years. So
I have a question for you. So do you have a number for what the region is charging us for using the gyms that the taxpayers already paid for? How much is that coming out of your budget? Because that wasn't budgeted for, because that was enforced at New House.
Correct. It wasn't budgeted for this year. In putting together this particular budget, my game plan was to go ahead and try and utilize some other facilities other than the region in order to avoid that particular line item. Specifically, I was looking to hopefully talk with the DPW director and see if we could have some volleyball nets installed up at West Glocester, which has a very nice gym facility. So that would be a line item that would be subtracted. In terms of the number that we're sending to the region, I have spoken with one of the finance individuals up there, and my rough estimate, and they can confirm that, it's probably going to be around $3,000, maybe just a hair over there, and that's for utilization of the gymnasium from November until this April. I think they have been, the region themselves have been accommodating and understanding that this was something that nobody had anticipated was going to happen in this particular way. I think that there's been a lot of, let's just say, grenades tossed in both directions. So I think probably the best way to go ahead and move forward on this is to try and be a little bit more independent of utilizing those facilities, so that way we can respect the fact that they're trying to charge an appropriate amount of money for the individuals that need to be charged up there.
Yeah, it's too bad because, that's another, the taxpayers pay for those facilities, now they can't use them. We're looking for a way to not have to pay $3,000. Something that had been going for 50 years, never been a problem. So, I mean, that's $3,000 more that we have to take out of our budget for all these other things. So that's, and you know what, we don't charge to plow there, we don't charge for them to use your field. So we're taking all of that on, and $3,000 in the big scheme of things, or a $30 million budget, it's not a lot of money, but, it's talking about, working together, right? Because one thing you need to think about, there's a 3.74% increase proposed. What would you say, Michael, about 1.5% of that is just from the region, which 35 people from Gloucester showed up to approve? Does that sound about right? Right about that. So what we're talking about for the Gloucester schools in the municipality here is about 2%, roughly, right? So
Yeah.
I understand what you're saying, and I understand your concept, and I applaud it for trying to find a way, but at the same time, it's frustrating sitting here, being a taxpayer, just as well as being on the council, having to
And which I can
do that.
totally understand. I think moving forward, what I'm looking to try and do is kind of play with the hand that has been dealt. And sometimes things aren't necessarily ideal, but I think that individuals can look at various situations and kind of understand that sometimes you have to serve the greater need. And while I don't want to have to send money up to the region, I can understand why it is that they're trying to tighten up the belt on their facility use policy, because there has been numerous groups up there that have utilized those facilities for a very long time and haven't necessarily paid their fair share to utilize it. So I kind of look at myself and my department as like an unfortunate casualty of trying to serve a greater good. I do indeed hope that that's what eventually does work out, that it'll fit the needs of what the region's looking to do. But ultimately, I just have to go ahead and look at what we can do alternatively to, make certain that our programming continues to run, as you had pointed out, the tradition that we currently have standing.
Yeah, but I go back to my point, it's too bad the taxpayers can't use those facilities anymore. That's sad, so.
Yep, if you wanna come right up.
Thank you, Bob. Because there have been $3,000 more right there that we could have used for services.
Hi there, Renee Palazzo, 11 Maplewood Drive, speaking as a taxpayer and superintendent of the region. I appreciate working with you, Mr. Shields, and I feel like that's what we've been trying to do. The policy has been in place prior to me starting as superintendent, and it was realizing that it had not been enforced, maybe is what I would say, by the previous administration. However, the amount that's been billed hasn't been billed yet, and working with Mr. Shields to see when the facilities were used is the point we're at. So the building is requested, but if an athletic competition needs to take precedent, it's not being billed. So he will work with the business office to see how much is actually used to be billed. What we found is that the fee is being charged not for youth sports, not for all rec sports, but for adult sports in which many of the players are not residents. So it's not that it's not that the taxpayers are not available or able to use the facilities. It's that when the facilities are being used, it's ensuring that they are being used by taxpayers. So that's the part that we're in. I feel like we've been working together. We're trying to work together. I'm a taxpayer as well. I live here. This matters to me. But I also don't want it to be misunderstood that the region is not charging an additional $3,000 for anything that would prevent taxpayers from being a part of it. It is something separate. It is adult, and not every player there are residents
Many
of
from
Gloucester.
Foster, does Foster get charged? So we have to bear the brunt of that?
Anyone who uses the facilities follows the building use policy. There's a form that has to be filled out. It has to be signed off by 3 and 4
Right,
people.
but what you're saying is there's people from other towns, many of them are from Foster. But we're footing the bill as Gloucester Rec, and it's always been that way. So somebody made a decision that, okay, you mentioned, well, we haven't used it, done it for a long time, but now we decided to do it.
I'm sorry, I'm confused, but if
Yeah,
if
I am
Gloucester,
too, because
right.
I don't know why somebody decided we're gonna turn this key on now, we're gonna charge $75 for something to be done that's already being done.
My hope, not the person
But
who's
what
in
I'm
charge of
saying
it,
is, you're
to
saying
not-
people from other towns are using it. But I'm saying residents from Foster are using it in the guise of Gloucester Rec, which
Sure.
always, adult basketball, adult volleyball.
Sure.
I think there's also
So is
Smith.
Foster, well, I'm not worried about them right now, I'm just saying about Foster, is Foster reimbursing you, are you charging Foster a percentage of that?
The
Because we're
person
footing the
the
bill for
person-
Foster then.
or the organization who fills out the building use form checks off that they will pay those fees. They sign off on it. That's the form that's completed. So whoever completes that form then gets billed for whatever services they have. So I just wanted the clarification that, again, moving forward as a taxpayer, continuing to work with Mr. Shields to ensure that our taxpayers get the facilities that, yes, are in Gloucester. But I just don't want to leave here and have anyone think that that the region is looking to get $3,000 from the town. I just needed that clarification for.
I think the funny thing is, the people who are in the region, the percentage of them, they live in town, so they're paying for it. So, sorry, I just can't get past that one. Taxpayers having to use this, to pay to use the facilities. I can't get past that one, sorry.
Can I just say, well,
Just come on up, please, thank you.
Well, this isn't really, we're talking about the budget here, so I don't wanna
Okay.
I'm sorry I got into a segue, but it does count $3,000 towards our budget, so.
Okay.
If you wanna listen, that's fine, but I'm just saying, I don't wanna get too far off on a tangent.
All right, let's get back to the budget.
Well, that is part of the budget.
I
So
know.
it sounds like we're not gonna be using the region anymore. We're trying to use West Gloucester for adult basketball and adult volleyball.
I think that's the route to go. I think that will alleviate some of this tension that has developed over something that, in the grand scheme of things, is a minor thing. And I think that sometimes trying to avoid elements that are gonna cause fuss may be the ideal way to go about it.
We went around when they built, they wanted all the big additions, built on the big field house and everything. Remember one of the things that they said that, hey, this is great because all our residents can use it.
I know. I think ultimately, though, what's happening here is we're going down a rabbit trail right now. And while I completely understand exactly your thoughts and your ideas and how it would affect my budget bottom line.
Not just me, by the way, Bob, there's a lot of people who feel the
Yes.
same way.
And I can understand that. I think you being the mouthpiece currently, if that makes a little bit more sense.
At the end of the day, I'm
Voice
trying to
of
save the
people.
town money for something that we're already paying for. That's what I'm saying, we're being double charged.
Yep, but
For taxes and then taxes to pay for the recreation. So that's what I'm trying to do.
Mhm. Yes,
So anyway,
okay.
and I'm trying to give you some money back towards,
I completely understand what you're trying to do, Walter. Thank you. You good?
Good. Thank you.
thank you.
Walter Steer, 1318 Putnam Pike. I don't know, it's been pretty sad to hear some of the things that's going on in this town in the last couple of years. And I don't care how good a budget you put together, if you don't follow the budget, you're gonna have a problem. So, you know, I got a few things. They're minuscule compared to the problems that this town has right now. I don't know how you're ever gonna come up with a budget that people are gonna feel, have any, to feel good about. I've got a couple of things on the Glocester schools, on page 12. Transportation. Right on the top of the page, it says elementary transportation. In 21-20, it was $614,000. The proposed budget is $523,000. So that, it went down. I know we've got only one vendor instead of two now, and we consolidated some routes. So that, I assume that's why it went down. But you go down a little further, transportation secondary, in 21-22 it was 427,000 and change. Now it's 881,000. In 3 years it doubled. And Glocester went down. Can anyone explain what happened there? Because Glocester pays for the busing up there, so.
Yeah, Pat, if you want to please come up and answer the question.
I don't know, maybe Beth or Kathy can help me out, but I think it wasn't, the transportation pass-through wasn't being shown. So they were saying it wasn't offsetting the expense, so we had to raise the transportation up higher. So when the pass-through came through, it was offset at the top. So I think that's what happened, that's how it was explained to me.
So that'd be about 330,000.
Right.
That would come off of there.
Right.
Okay, that's,
It's shown as a revenue on the front page.
Yeah.
The
yes,
pass-through.
that's a
Yeah, right,
kind
so
of,
it's, yeah.
it
so
used to,
It used to not.
we didn't
be
show
there.
it,
Used to
it
wash
just
it.
subtract. Okay, I guess that's a good explanation, I think, for that. I didn't think of that. In the budget, I didn't see any, on the sick day buyout for certifieds, I didn't see any money in that line item. Is that, do we still have a restricted account with any money in it?
There is a restricted account, but for the sick day buyouts, as a non-certified, it's in their contract, they can buy back some.
Well, I know for the
each year.
non-certs, but I'm talking about the certs.
Right, for them, that would be a retirement payout, and unless they've notified us if they were retiring.
So nobody's retiring.
I just got notification on a couple of people, but that would, there was a.
That costs us about 25,000 a person when that
Correct,
happens.
correct.
So,
Like I said, if we don't know,
no, because we did have a restricted fund at one time, but I guess that's dried up.
there is another account, I think it should be in the financials, that OPEB, for that post-retirement benefits. Because it's expiring with the retirement, where they have to be 65 to retire, so we would be obligated for health care further. But there is an OPEB bank account.
But is that the only,
That you'd have to go back to the audit.
obligation we have? We must have other ones other than the healthcare. No?
Not after they retire, no.
So, how much money is in that account?
I don't know offhand right now. No, I just forgot what I was gonna talk about.
Okay, all right, that's, and the one other thing is, it looks like we're gonna have I don't know what we call them now, a superintendent and assistant superintendent. And the amount of money that's in the budget is the same that it was before. Now, I don't know if these two people are gonna work for the same amount. That's another question I have.
I see somebody nodding their head. I'm assuming yes?
Yeah.
Okay. And I'm gonna be bouncing back and forth probably between the two budgets, but we've had special appropriations in the past. foster Glocester proration, the loss of state aid, and then there was one for future operations. The future operations and the loss of state aid were both for the local schools. And the budget usually took money from the surplus and put it in there every year to keep these built up. Now, I'm not sure if both of these budgets have still got money in them. It looks like we're gonna use, for loss of state aid, we're gonna use quite a bit, so that must still have quite a bit of money. I know Dave talked about it, said you may not have enough money in there to do what you think you're doing. But over the years, it seems like some years, these were special appropriations. They go before the voters every year to be voted up or down. Sometimes they're voted up, and the last couple of years, some of these have been getting voted down. But it seems that the last couple of years, some of these things haven't been on your ballot, but they got put into the budget somehow without going before the voters. And I'm talking about either the future operations or the loss of state aid. I don't remember which one. But so there's a problem there. And when Dave was talking about all this money being spent without voter approval, they're breaking the charter. I don't know if anybody cares about this, but I think we should. I think I knew where a lot of that money came from. 2 years ago, we changed healthcare providers, and we got almost a $1.3 million. That's what we had in surplus down there, and we got that back. Part of that was owed to the teachers. It had to be used for them. But the rest of it, probably almost $1 million, a lot of that money, I think, was spent. Because we overspent our budget. Somebody used that money and they shouldn't have used it. Now, I think you ought to look into it, find out what happened. I don't think you should just let this go by. When you got over I don't know how much Dave said was spent extra, and all that money should have been approved by voters.
Yeah,
Other than that, it's illegal.
I remember we voted on that wall, and I don't know when that money was coming back in, when you and I were on school committee.
Right.
We changed that provider. I don't know when that money was coming back to the town, though.
Well, we got it.
We did get it?
Oh,
Okay.
yeah, we got it, I think about 6 months after we did it. They had to wait a while to see if we had any expenses left.
Okay.
That money came in, and I thought it was gonna be put aside and saved. But a lot of that money's been wasted, spent without authorization. I don't think we should just let this go by. It's not fair to the taxpayers, for one thing. They can spend the money if it is approved by the taxpayers, which I assume at our financial meeting this year, the school committee is going to be asking to use surplus money for this year's budget. 'Cause I think this year's budget is a problem too. And we based next year's budget on these two budgets, and these two budgets aren't right. I just don't know how we can have any confidence in the numbers we have until we do some real deep diving. We know about 23 because we have the audit. But this year, if the finance department can come up with, actual so far and prove that we're not in trouble, then it's okay. But I know we're shorthanded. I'm not blaming anybody. The people who do blame probably aren't here anymore, unfortunately. And I know I was on the school committee. Some people look at the budget, other people just take it. When you hand it to you, you look at it, and you take it for granted that that person who gave you that budget was doing it right. And unfortunately, as it turns out, it doesn't always happen that way. John, you know, some people pay more attention to budgets than others. And I noticed this year, for the regional proration, we're not gonna put any more money in. I've been telling you people for 3 years. But you always had someplace else to spend it. A couple of years when we were on the good side of the proration, you spent that money somewhere else. You didn't put it away. You might have put 100,000 away. Well, now we're paying this year. The student count for next year looks horrible for Glocester. And this year, you're gonna get away with a tax decrease. After that, I wouldn't want to be you people. You have a police station, the region is gonna go out for a bond, multi-million-dollar bond, I assume. The proration's going against us. We now have another rebound coming up in a year and a half, and people are gonna get screwed on that. I don't know, I got a few other things, but I'll tell you what, I think you've got plenty to think about. And I think the taxpayers are gonna have to look really hard at this budget, because we better get a, you know, you're proposing like a 29% decrease, a 29-cent decrease. I know you said don't go by that, but I hope it's a lot more than that, because that's not gonna make up for the last 2 years what the town, people of this town have put up with.
Thank you.
Kathy Lamontagne, Josal Road. I definitely agree with Walter regarding the appropriations for the region for the increase in students and for proration in upcoming years. In the past, that had been put aside, and if I can remember, there was one of the regional budgets where Dr. Bonds had actually gone through our budget and took that money and incorporated it into his budget for that year when they went to the voters. So that kind of wiped that out because he actually had gone through our budget. I think Diane was here then.
The proposal,
Yeah, his proposal, and basically used that money into his budget.
To your point, Kathy, and to Mr. Steer's point too, there was a couple of years that we put it in and people shot it down. Voters voted it down, so that was unfortunate.
It has to be put in, just so you guys understand how that works. When the student ratio changes and it swings, again, in not in our favor, the tax rate still increases by 3%. The region still increases their budget 3%. But
it's just who's paying.
It's just who's paying a portion of that percent. But the next year, you should have incorporated 3% in your budget, because next year you have 3% plus wherever that swing, plus or minus wherever that swing is. So you gotta realize, if the region's going up 3%, we have to put that money aside at 3% no matter what. It needs to be in the budget.
Correct, it's just how it's gonna swing with the extra student
Yes.
counts.
Yep.
And usually we try to accommodate for that. Also, question, Board of Canvassers. We may be having an extra referendum if the council decides to put the police station on a separate referendum other than November ballot. Is there any for poll workers, advertising? We just put one ad in for the fireworks of $105 for a little line, so I can only imagine the Board of Canvassers with their advertising costs are. If that's, well, we're kind of planning for that, or if they need to plan for that, for the advertising, if we're gonna have another special election with the police station. The other thing, the land trust, the realty stamp tax, which is the 75%. Kind of looking at the numbers already, they're already up to 98, and we're only budgeted 80, and we still have a few months to go. So that should definitely be increased to be projected.
What page is that on?
Charter?
Do you have that?
Put that money in.
I didn't write the page ones down. That's the land trust.
Yep.
That's part of the charter, 75%.
Thank
Page
you.
11. I know that's been brought up before with charter committee, lock it into a certain amount, and land trusts kind of put signs up everywhere where it increased, I guess, since like 2016, 17, it was like 40,000, last year was 102,000. It's kind of like a shot in the dark, depending on.
The realty taxes go up and down depending on the
Right,
market, so.
right. I mean, we were between 40 and 60, and then in the last 2-3 years, it's been 90, 102 last year.
Crazy market.
You know, it is kind of hard to plan for, but probably before you get your final draft, go and get the actuals, so we're a little bit closer on that one. Department head salaries, I know this was already brought up. People don't like what I have to say. Zoning, 75,000, finance, 120, tax collector, 72, tax assessor, 69, chief of police, 115, public works, 97, senior center, 70, town clerk, 85, all full-time in-house positions. Planning, 89,000, part-time remote, work from home, 27 hours. Planning, I don't know why one department, unless are you planning on bringing in someone full-time in-house for that type of salary who is like the fourth over all of our department heads? It's kind of out of place compared to other planners. We know there's other grant work, but there's also an issue with the grants that should be looked at. I don't know if it's going to fall into this year's budget or next. There's been, I guess, the waterization grant, decentralized water wastewater improvement grant. There was $465,000 from EPA, which finance hasn't seen the award letter yet. The $250 for the SNEP and the $2,000 ARPA match, which is all fine. I don't know if we've gotten the quotes in yet, because we have the third-party water district that we have to do for an extended minimum of 5 years. Where is this grant amount going to cover it? It's part of the grant agreement. I read it today. The money that we received in, is that going to cover for the long term to cover those grant funds? So we're in compliance. And is there any further obligations on outstanding grants that we might have got the matching funds, but there's other obligations financially that we have to adhere to not be in violation and not have to pay anything back?
We can ask Karen, she's here, because she's done all that homework before she's presented that to us.
Okay. And that's all I have.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, I was gonna get up, I had just a quick thing on the proposed capital budget expenditures. On the paving and drainage line item, there's $368,165. That's the exact amount that we have, let me go back up a second. The state has the municipal road and bridge program. It's a new program they started in this fiscal year where they allocate paving money to municipalities, and we're required to match it at 67%. They just offer it, you don't have to take it, but everyone generally takes it. It's a way to just leverage the money you're gonna spend anyway to get their money. So this $368,165 is matching the projects in this fiscal year that we're gonna do in FY25. So that $368,165 is already allocated to projects matching the FY24 municipal road and bridge program. There's the FY25 proposed municipal road and bridge program that's gonna propose to allocate $130,000 to each municipality. And that, if we want to take advantage of that $130,000, we need to match it with $260,000. That's not included in this current budget. So just something to think about. I'm just pointing it out. I'm happy to, do you want me to answer any other questions about the
Well, there's concern
grant?
about the grants, so.
Yeah, sure. So we have gone out for qualifications, and we are hopefully going to be bringing a contract forward soon. We're getting ready to go to the Board of Contracts. About the third-party wastewater management, what we're trying to do, which is pretty groundbreaking for rural municipalities, and this is why we got the funding, is we're trying to look at how we can set up a third-party wastewater management entity to manage the properties that take advantage of the financial incentives that will be offered through this grant. Now, what that means is, as I recognize, we're not gonna add an employee. We're not gonna have someone that's gonna do this full-time. So what this would do is the grant provides funding to transition us from creating the wastewater management district to find someone, a third party, so third party is an outside source, that would be self-sustaining by the members of the district and manage the district as a whole to make sure that the septic systems that we invest funding in are maintained in the long term, because that's the only way we're gonna solve the problem that we have with contaminating drinking water and groundwater. So grant funds will go to transition this to the third party. That's what's in the grant, that's what makes it groundbreaking, that's what is funded, and that's the plan for how it's gonna move forward. Is there anything else that,
Good.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else? Yep.
I was looking on the budget and I didn't see the senior, discount. Are you considering raising the senior discount from $1,000 to $2,000? It's been $1,000 for years and years and never goes up.
No,
No.
that's never come into any discussions.
You're not gonna raise that to 2,000?
We haven't.
Why not?
It is 2,000.
Everything else, it's not 2,000, it's 1,000.
For what?
For tax exemption for seniors,
Yes, $2,070.
it's 2,000?
Yeah.
I thought it was 1,000. When did it go up? Maybe I should raise it higher
It's been that way
then.
for
Maybe I
years.
should make
There
it.
was an additional 1,000 if you're over 80.
Okay, only if you're over 80 you get the additional?
Right.
Otherwise, how much is it?
$2,070.
Okay, so if you're over 80 it goes to 3,000.
Right. Yeah.
Okay. Do you think you could raise that up a little bit more? When did that happen?
That's been that way
Years.
for years. I'm
Okay.
not sure
If
what.
it's been that way for years, why
Well,
don't you
they
raise it up?
changed the exemption in 2017, I believe. And that's when they added the extra 1,000.
Eight
If
years ago.
Yeah.
Okay? If it's been 8 years, I'm asking you to raise it more for this year, for the future. If it's been there for 8 years and hasn't been raised, I'm asking you to raise that one. Okay?
Thank
Because
you.
it's tough on the seniors. We have a strict we get so much money and that's it. And everything else is going up. Food's going up, everything, gasoline, fuel for my house. And if it's been 8 years, that's a long time. No wonder I can't remember.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs.
Thank you.
Could I have your name, please? Could I have your name?
Sharon Lyman from Harmony.
Thank you.
Do we have an idea what that number, how many residents that would affect?
I really don't. I know we give away probably almost $3 million.
Yeah.
So $3 million is the
Yeah.
exemption?
In exemptions.
In exemption.
Probably the most, it's one of the, if not the
It's the
most
most
generous in the
generous
in the
state
state,
of
yeah.
Rhode Island, so. For a good reason, right? People wanna stay here.
Yep.
That's a lot of money.
Anybody else?
Can I say something? You know, there's been this narrative that we haven't had a finance director here for over the last couple of years. And, you know, we've been in and out, right? We've been doing everything we can to make sure that everything's running. But we have 2 people sitting in the front here who've been working extremely hard over the last year to make sure that bills get paid and we're apprised of things that are going on. Now, I don't know how this works for the schools. I don't know if they've approached them with any questions, because that's not our prerogative, right? But I've heard it several times over the last couple of meetings, and I want to stop that narrative. We do have two very competent people working for the town right now, making sure that everything needs to be done is being done. We heard some things in here tonight that we need to work on, absolutely. But we do have people in place who are doing the job. So I just need to say that. And I wanted to thank them for that. And I want to thank everybody involved in that department doing that too.
Great. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Anybody else?
Council?
Anybody?
Thanks to everybody here. There's an awful lot of leaders in this room. Everybody in this room is passionate about this town. There's a lot of volunteers in this room, right? At the end of the day, we all want the same things. You know, and similar to what Walt just, yeah, we've got a lot on our plate. We all do. You know, right now, this is what's in front of us. You know, we've got to understand some things from the past. But I think right now, if everyone can, all the leadership, department heads, whomever, really takes a good look and makes it a conscious effort to look at, you know, actual versus budgeted and make sure we're on track. But everybody's comments tonight were appreciated, and but I guess that's all I have to say. And we're hoping we're gonna try and deliver the best budget we possibly can for everybody this year, as we do every year. But we've learned a lot, and here we are.
And I do appreciate everybody came out tonight, because we have 10,000 people in town, and we have like 30 people here, maybe if that. So, I mean, it kind of goes back to the regional schools and their financial meeting. We had, from the two towns, I think, was there 47 maybe? It wasn't more than 50. That included the school committee, and there was probably
Police, poll workers, and
five
school
people
committee. There
in
were
this room.
35 people from Gloucester.
Outside of the school committee, there were probably 5 people who were at that meeting. So, and that's where a majority of the increase, well, decent amount. Once they hand us that bill, we gotta pay it, because the taxpayers approved it.
I do also want to say, and this, everybody in this room knows how to get in touch with us. Certainly, I know that I communicate with a lot of you guys. Council hasn't made any changes to this budget yet. This is what's been delivered and posted to the budget board. But if any of you all want to chat, I don't want to speak for everybody, but I'll speak for myself and probably could assume. Call us, happy to chat. You know, we've got 2 weeks to have the final product. And if you're, you know, at a neighbor's house or a friend's house and there's questions or concerns or whatnot, like I said, I think everybody in this room knows how to get in touch with me. Give out our number. Our numbers are all posted. Emails are all posted, and you know.
I have a quick question in regards to off the subject of us. For the referendum for the region, is there any way the town can step in and say, hey, we need a daytime or all-day referendum? I think one of the problems is, and what I had totally forgot, is that they have their budget meeting 7 o'clock, and then they're voting 9, 10 o'clock at night. And then it's like, well, why didn't anyone show up? It's like almost a guarantee, because they have all the teachers there, that we can request that the region actually have it as a region, have their discussion on their budget, which they did, but have things at a reasonable time or an all-day referendum. It is a large number that both towns are paying. And they do it at this absurd Tuesday, Wednesday night at 9 o'clock at night.
I mean, they'd have to make a charter change like we did, like the council, that was 2014 or something
Now, could our
around there.
council go and maybe get with Glocester and make a recommendation to them to change their charter?
No, the region's own law.
Right.
The legislature of Rhode Island made the region, they're their own entity.
Correct.
We do not control it. We can, you go to the meetings and you can ask them.
Right,
Just
that's
like we
what
could
I
ask them,
mean.
but
Maybe
we.
our council and Foster's council write a letter to them saying, hey, we would appreciate if you could amend your charter to make it more reasonable for taxpayers.
They can't amend their charter, they'd have to,
Right, have a
again,
charter
the
review.
legislature, the Rhode Island legislature has to, it's a law that created that back in the
Yeah,
fifties.
Alright.
Just like our charter, though. Maybe a charter change.
So we'd have to go to the charter, it says we have it Wednesday at 9 o'clock at
I
night.
think that the charter states they have to have it at a certain time or something.
Well, I mean, us too, but we went to the all-day referendum because it gave more people the opportunity to vote
Right.
over the course of the day. Like, we were lucky to, hate to say the word, to scrape up 25 people sometimes for the town financial meeting to have a quorum. And typically, we average about 200 people that show up, which is still
Right.
not good, but it's still 10 times as many people would normally show up at a town financial meeting. So it gives more people more opportunity.
All right, with that being said, make a motion to close the public hearing.
No, I don't know if we want to close it because when we come back,
Do we want to table it?
which case is more, I don't remember. I just want to make sure if people have questions or comments, they'll still be able to.
That's gonna be up to you. I mean, you'll have till the 25th.
Right.
If you decided to keep it open. So you say you want the council to talk now and then let them speak again, that's entirely up to you.
Okay. As long as people still have the opportunity to speak.
Okay. 3, council discussion interaction, A, amendments, additions, changes to proposed budget, discussion interaction. Okay.
I'll make a motion to adjourn.